Good morning, fifth grade. I hope y'all are wide awake and ready to roll. Here we go. We are starting chapter number 12. We are talking about fractions, multiplication, and division. Before we get into the lesson, let's first off just do a little bit of practice and review. So here we go. We're looking at this screen right here, 1/4 plus 2/4, adding fractions together. I can add those together because I've got a common denominator. The answer is 3/4. For this problem right here, though, I cannot add these fractions yet because I don't have a common denominator, but I can make a common denominator, and when we find the common denominator, we want to find the least common denominator, and the least one is going to be 12. When we change our fractions, we will get 7/12 when we add those together. What about when we're subtracting decimals? We need to make sure that our decimals do line up just as they have shown here. I need to annex a 0 right there, and then I can borrow and subtract, bring down my decimal to get an answer right there. What about this one right here? Well, again, I am subtracting fractions, common denominator. I can go ahead and subtract, but what do you notice about 5/15? Can I reduce that? Hopefully your answer was yes. Reduce it down to 1/3 because the greatest common factor between 5 and 15 is 5. Reducing is we are dividing. 5 divided by 5 is 1. 15 divided by 5 is 3. Hopefully these things are all ringing a bell. Again, when we're adding or subtracting decimals, we need to line up our decimals as you have seen here. Then we can add. I need to get a common fraction denominator. To do that by finding the common denominator of 9. Let's go ahead and skip ahead to this problem right here. 567 minus a number is equal to 321. How can I find what the value of n is? Well, let's see here. I need to subtract a number from 567 that will equal 321. So if I subtract 567 minus 321, that didn't work out too well. Let's see, pretend with me that that's a 321. 7 minus 1 is 6. 6 minus 2 is 4. 5 minus 3 is 2. My number is 246. Let's try this one. 6 minus 2.202 is equal to n. Well, that one's simple, but when I work it out, I am going to need to annex zeros. Make sure you annex your zeros there, and then you're going to have to come over here and borrow from the 6, and then continue on. You should get a value of 3.98. Now I've got a number minus a mixed number is equal to 7. Well, how can I find that number? If I'm subtracting here, then if I add 7 to 3 and 5/8, I did that all wrong. This should be a 5. Trying to get the hang of this, bear with me here. If I add 7 to 3 and 5/8, I will get 10 and 5/8. And if I subtract 10 and 5/8 minus 3 and 5/8, I should get 7, and there we go. We got the correct answer. Let's go ahead and skip forward to our lesson for today. Read this out loud with me. Andy feeds his fish half a teaspoon of fish food each day. So how much food will he feed his fish in 3 days? Well, if I've got 3 days, I'm feeding him half a teaspoon every day. I can just add up half a teaspoon plus half a teaspoon plus half a teaspoon and get 3/2 teaspoon, or as a mixed number, it would be 1 1/2 teaspoons. Don't forget your label there. It wouldn't just be 1 1/2. It would be 1 1/2 teaspoons. You're talking about a specific amount of food. Blake feeds his cat 2/3 cup of cat food each day. How much food will he feed his cat in 4 days? Again, if I feed him 2/3 day 1, 2/3 day 2, and so on and so forth, I am adding fractions. Do I have a common denominator? Yes, I do. So I can just add the numerators together to get 8/3. As a mixed number, it would be 2 and 2/3 cups. We're talking about how much food. So 2 and 2/3 cups of food, not 2 and 2/3 food, 2 and 2/3 cups. Hopefully you're seeing a different way that we can solve these problems. We're going to talk about that in just a few minutes here, but as we do go through these, make sure you're thinking that way, because we're actually getting up to it right now. 3/2. Well, can't I rewrite, because 1/2, I'm just adding 1/2 3 times. So if I multiply 3 times 1/2, when we multiply fractions and a whole number, let's take a look here. 3 times 1/2. Well, that's saying that I have 3 different halves, correct? I have 3 different halves. Well, when I multiply fractions, I'm going to multiply the numerator together, and I'm going to multiply the denominators together. Well, there's no denominator in 3. We can pretend, though, that there is a denominator, because 3/1 is the same as 3, correct? So really, 3 times 1, multiply your numerators together, multiply your denominators. 1 times 2 is 2, and we get 1.5. We put the 2 halves together, which makes a whole, and we're left with a half, 1.5. Going back to Blake's example here, again, I'm adding 2/3 together. How many times am I adding 2/3 together? I'm adding it up 4 different times. So I can actually multiply 4 times 2/3, and this is what 2/3 looks like, 4 of those. Therefore, again, if it helps you to put a 1 underneath to have a denominator, multiply your numerators. 4 times 2, which is 8, and 1 times 3, which is 3. Multiply your numerators and your denominators. If we put these pieces together, that 2/3 right there, break those apart and add them to your wholes there, I get 8/3 is equivalent to a whole plus 2/3, which in essence, 8/3 as a mixed number will be 2 and 2/3. I hope that these picture examples down here are of help to you. 8 divided by 3 is the other way that we can solve for finding the mixed number. Remember, your numerator goes inside of your division bar. 3 goes outside. What is the name of the number inside of the division bar? Can anybody remember? What's the answer to a division problem? What about this number out there? Hopefully you are able to remember those terms there. 8 divided by 3 is 2. I'm going to have a remainder of 2. What do I do with my remainder? I put it as a fraction. 2 over the 3 there. 2 and 2/3 over your divisor. How much cat food will Blake need for 1 week if he continues to give his cat 2/3 cup every day? Well, I've got days here, but then I'm also talking about a week. What do I know about the comparison of a week and days? How many days are in a week? Hopefully you said 7. If Blake gives his cat 2/3 a cup every day for 1 week, you can multiply 7 times 2/3, or the longer way would be to add up 2/3 7 times. Let's take a look at what this looks like on a number line. If I've got a number line from 0 to 5, I'm counting up 2/3. Notice from 0 to 1 and from in between all of my whole numbers, I have divided it into 3 different parts. How did I know to divide my number line into 3 parts? Well, check out that denominator. That will tell you how many parts do I divide up my whole number, my number line into. Let's check it out. I need 7 jumps of 2/3. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 jumps of 2/3. From 0 to here is 2/3, another 2/3 jump, and all the way up. Where am I at, class? I should be at 4 and 2/3. Or if you multiplied this out, this was 7 over 1 times 2/3. Multiply your numerator. 7 times 2, which is 14. 1 times 3 is 3. What is 14/3 as a mixed number? 4 and 2/3. Again, the other ways that you can find your mixed number is by dividing. 6 times 3/4. What is this going to look like on a number line? Again, check out your denominator to see how many pieces am I going to break up my whole. From 0 to 1, I break it into 4 pieces. 1, 2, 3, 4. I need 6 jumps of 3/4. So here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Notice there's 3/4 in between each jump. Where did I land? I should be at 4 and here's the halfway mark. I should be at 4 and 1/2. This is 6 over 1. 18 over 4 is going to be your improper fraction. Change 18 over 4 to a mixed number. You should be at 4 and 1/2. Let's try this one. 3 times 1/6. I have pizza charts down here, and I have 1/6, 1/6, and 1/6 here. 3 times 1/6. Well, if I take those pieces out and I combine them to one pizza graph, how much do I have, class? I should have a half. So what is 3 times 1/6? It is 1/2. What does that look like on a number line? Well, notice from 0 to 1, I have broken up my whole into 6 pieces because 6 is my denominator. If I need 3 bounces of 1/6. Start at 0. Where am I at? I'm at 3/6. Another way to solve, these are just different ways to solve multiplying a whole number by a fraction. I hope that you're on page 267 and you're following along with some of these examples. We're going to do some in the book in just a few minutes on a different video. But make sure you're following along. These will be very helpful when we get to our example problems. 3 times 1/6. 1/6 plus 1/6 plus 1/6. That will get you 3/6. Here we go. Let's go to our next problem here. 5 times 1/6. Again, we're multiplying our numerators times our denominators. The denominator here is just 1. What is anything times 1, class? Well, hopefully you said itself. So that's why we just have 6 here. My answer is 5/6. 7 times 1/8. Multiply your numerators. 7/8 is my answer. 3 times 2/5. 3 times 2 over 5 is 6/5. Hopefully I'm not going too fast for you, but these should be easy to pick up on. 12/5 or 2 and 2/5 is your answer. 8 times 4 is 32 over 7. 4 and 4/7 is your mixed number. Let's move on to one more problem before we get into some examples in the next video. Here's my rule. Whatever x is, I want to multiply it by 1/4. Well, excuse me. I want to multiply whatever's in this chart right here by 1/4. Well, what is x times 1/4? X times 1/4. What if my number is 2? What's 2 times 1/4? Hopefully you said 2/4, but you got to reduce it down to 1/2. What about 7? 7/4 or 1 3/4 as a mixed number. What about 10? If you had 10 over 4, you needed to reduce it down to 5 over 2, or as a mixed number, 2 and 1/2. That's all for the lesson today. Stay tuned for your assignment though, and for example problems in the next video. See you guys.